We're live and streaming a very, very special episode of the LeaderSpeak podcast today. We're very pleased to have Kirk D'Amico, who's president of Myriad Pictures, all the way from Santa Monica. Kirk, I hope that's where you are at this point.
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic. And as playing a role in profiling companies within that are doing breakthrough work within the entertainment supply chain, this is one more attempt for us to sort of present one more leader and also a very interesting company that we will hope to profile and understand a bit of in a deeper fashion. Our attempt will also be to sort of understand from Kirk what are the key focus areas, especially with 2026 around the corner. Some of the key sort of initiatives and key objectives and goals that he's leading. Kirk, what a great pleasure to actually have you speak with the Vitrina audience today. Your voice is going across to 100,000 plus members of our community. These are folks within the entertainment supply chain globally. They are in right from IP and production to post distribution and streaming. Very, very warm welcome to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Kirk, one of the key aspects that we usually start off with is to have the leader actually explain at an elevator pitch what the company does and what the company is all about. So maybe that's a great place for us to start off our conversation today.
Okay. Well, we've been around for quite a while. The company's more than 20 years old. I had executive positions more than 25 years ago, I guess now, with both the Samuel Goldwyn Company and with Village Roadshow, and then I started Myriad. It was started off primarily only as a sales company, but over the years we've been involved in production, finance, sales, and distribution, and also now more than 10 years ago, my wife and I started a distribution company in Canada, which is called Photon Films, and it's currently headed up by Mark Sloan there, who was formerly at E1. So we work separately, but very closely with Photon in Canada.
Fascinating. And again, the area that you're speaking about is actually a very exciting one. This is the place where there's been a lot of friction and a lot of flux in the last few months, both in terms of financing, distribution. As the world is kind of shifting on its axis with digital and streaming, and also some pressures on box office. It would be great to sort of get your thoughts relating to some of the changes. Maybe the place to start could be also just the key milestones as you were building the company. At what point did you sort of expand, the operations into, let's say financing, for instance?
Well, in the early 2000s, we were in business with a German Neue Markt company called InMotion, and they financed a number of moves on our part. Number one, having an active production slate, which was production financing, where we also did all the international sales, and then worked with U.S. distributors. So, for example, we did The Good Girl with Jennifer Aniston that we sold to Fox Searchlight, or films like Van Wilder with one of Ryan Reynolds' first films that was distributed in the U.S. through Artisan, which was subsequently folded into Lionsgate. So that was a pretty exciting time for us. We also acquired a kind of old line international sales company with a library called J&M out of the UK, and we set up offices in the UK again in the early 2000s. When the UK government then though shut down their sale and leaseback program, I decided to shrink our activities and to consolidate back in Los Angeles. So we shut down the London office and really just focused on working out of Los Angeles. And then, subsequently, again, as I said before, now, gosh, I think it's actually almost 11 or 12 years ago, we started what was originally Pacific Northwest Pictures in Vancouver as a nationally recognized Canadian distribution company. And then we moved, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we moved to Toronto and renamed the company Photon. films. So, and we've been very active in international co-productions, Canadian productions, Canadian co-productions, but we've really reduced our production activities, certainly in California, but in the U.S. as well. We will oftentimes look for the best tax incentives or the best state in the U.S. to go and maximize whatever incentives they have. So California hasn't really been competitive for some time. So, for example, we were involved in a film called Bob Trevino Likes It with John Leguizamo that shot in Kentucky because of the incentives were pretty good there and the labor costs were lower.
Fascinating. When you talked about co-productions, is that the one way that you are sort of involved from a financing perspective in movie projects?
Yes, yeah, we help producers, be they in Germany or Canada or wherever. We try to organize between countries. We'll find a co-production company in another country, and we'll marry them with the project, with the originating producer. Sometimes we develop projects on our own. We developed through Photon a film that shot this past summer that Jeff Renfro directed. It stars Isabel Furman, called The Pond, and we shot that in Northern Ontario. And that was a project we developed with the writer director.
Understood. Fascinating. And then, do you also indulge in any other aspects of financing? Maybe debt?
Well, I would say the one thing we don't do is equity.
Okay.
But we will, if the conditions are right, we'll put up a minimum guarantee against distribution rights. But we don't do equity financing, and we work with banks and financial institutions. I think I mentioned before that we've worked with Bondit to finance our MGs, and other companies like 3 Point Capital, as well as banks. We tend to work with a lot of the Canadian banks.
Right. Fascinating. I was actually curious also about the sweet spot, Kirk, that you have, just in terms of, what kind of films are these? What kind of budgets would they be? You talked a little bit about the fact that, these are not a lot of US projects anymore. They might be shot elsewhere for incentive purposes. But what would be a sweet spot from a genre, theme, and budget perspective?
Well, there's outliers, right? There's low budget films. There's also higher budget films. Typically, very difficult to finance a film. Let's say above $30 million. It's really tough to do for the independents. But, I would say that our sweet spot where we tend to be most of the time is between 5 and 15 million.
Understood.
US.
And, okay. And then do you also have, other aspects like debt or gap, financing?
Well, we don't have a large facility. I mean, we did once upon a time in the 2000s, but we go project by project to to investment companies, to banks, and we have a track record of more than 20 years, and making sure that people get paid back, and so and to create a track record. I think that different companies are attracted to different venues. I mean, we know some private companies that are, willing to back Greek tax credits, or Polish tax credits, or what have you, Hungarian tax credits, and then other companies which are a little risk adverse in terms of advancing monies against some of those government tax credits.
That's right. Well, I mean, the world of tax credits itself has been, under massive change just in the last 18 months. All countries have upped the game in a big way. I don't know if you've sort of been tracking that actively and affecting some of the decisions that you're taking, or some of the independents that you are involved with are taking.
We're trying now to work on a couple of projects in Thailand, and then talking to the different financial institutions that are interested in financing the Thai tax credit. But that would be a new one for us.
Oh, got it. Fascinating. One aspect that I was also curious about was You mentioned TPC earlier as one of the partners along with Bonded. There's a deal recently of the 114 titles that you actually transferred to TPC as part of a deal. I was curious about, how was that structured? What were the motivations on both sides to execute a
Sure,
deal of that
sure.
sort?
Well, I think, my CFO for 18 years, Kevin Forrester, went over there to be TPC's CFO.
Okay.
So one of the great things was that Kevin was very familiar with our library. And we had other discussions with other, companies about the possibility of acquiring the library. But that was the best fit for us, both financially, but also just from a knowledge point of view. Is every film is different. Every film has a different story. I think it's kind of like wine.
Mm. Yep.
There's a story to every film, and so Kevin was familiar with all those different stories and all the different players.
Understood. And then the other aspect I was curious about was also, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've actually had such sort of tumultuous journeys within the industry. I was curious how COVID was for your company, and you can talk a little bit about just these last 5 years.
Sure. I mean, no one was going to the office except for me. It was me and my assistant, so we created our own little bubble. And also our offices then is where IFTA, who runs AFM, is now. But they were pretty big offices, and I was sitting there for months and months, just the two of us, which motivated us to find smaller space when that lease was up. But we had done a deal in 2019 with Gravitas, and we were selling their whatever they had available for international. And at that point in time, it was a library of over 300 titles, plus the new titles that were coming in where international was available. And most of those titles, frankly, were not theatrical. They were really, straight to VOD titles. And that at that particular point in time that was what a lot of the international platforms and distributors were looking for. They wanted things that they could show people could watch sitting in their homes. And we just happened to have a really large inventory at that time to be able to sell. So I think that really helped us get through that particular time. And then, it was, if you remember, everybody was saying, oh, well, it's going to last 2 weeks. Oh, well, maybe 2 months. And then it just became open-ended. But we managed to be involved in a couple of productions that shot during those early COVID days. We shot a film called The Lost Girls with Vanessa Richardson with Jolie Richardson and Vanessa Redgrave in the UK, which we worked on with Ingenious there. We shot a film with Walter Hill in New Mexico called Dead for a Dollar with Willem Dafoe and Christoph Waltz. And so we kept working not just on distribution, but on productions during that period of time. But it was difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think just in terms of all the key aspects that have had an impact, COVID obviously stands out as one big sort of blow to industry. But are you also affected by any of this linear change that's actually happening with broadcasters and TV networks who are sort of commissioning less?
I think in a macro sense, yes, because after the pandemic came the writers and actors strikes, which really curtailed domestic production dramatically. The timing on that was just not great for our industry. And then you've got the corporate consolidation. Paramount's let go over 2,000 people this year. If the Warner's deal moves forward, they'll continue to let people go, both at Paramount and Warner's. And on some level, I think that creates opportunity for groups of people to get together and form small businesses. But overall, it just creates uncertainty across the industry. So Paramount really was pulling back on their buying. a lot of independent distribution companies in the U.S. had output deals, whether they were with Amazon or Hulu or who you might have it, and those all have pretty much all gone away. So it's been much more challenging for the U.S. distributors to plan or to predict, what their ultimates are on each film that they acquire for distribution. And I think that's really been a drag on the business overall.
That's right. That's right. And then obviously compounded with that is just box office fortunes, which are slightly different. I had two questions relating to that. One is, how are you sort of seeing the box office changes that have happened, over the last 5 years? And the second one was, traditionally in your business, what was the international exposure for some of the films that you were helping get out? Was international 15%, 30%? How much was it to the overall revenues?
Well, there's a couple of questions there. The first, let me just talk about the box office for first instance, which is, the pandemic really decimated the box office on a worldwide basis.
That's right.
I think it also has changed the demographics. Before the pandemic, you had an older audience regularly going to the cinema because it was fairly inexpensive entertainment. Since the pandemic, that older audience really hasn't come back for the most part. So the younger audience has, and they're more willing to go back to the cinemas. And so the content, I think, has really changed. I think you've seen a huge increase in horror, action, perhaps younger stars.
Right.
It's really changed the content. And I think that we are very, very slow to see films for older audiences, for adults who would rather stay at home and watch it on a streaming platform.
Right.
We've acquired a couple of horror films for sales, and those have done well. I think that the international market, I think, is changing. I think it's less and less important what happens to the film in the U.S. It used to be really the main measurement by which international distributors would judge a film, but I think that's less and less the case. We've seen a huge shift in Asia, for example, where local productions, Asian productions, are just doing extremely well in the box office, and the distributors there have dropped their prices, but also just dropped their appetite for American or non-Asian films. And so, that's just I think, and we're seeing that in different parts of the world. And so, we're one of the things we're trying to do is to again have more co-productions where we get, 1 foot, if you will, in North America, or 1 foot in English-speaking countries, and another foot in a local language territory. And I think that we're really seeing, kind of a multinational approach now to getting films made and getting films distributed. And it's, I think, less and less dependent on what happens in the U.S.
There are so many aspects, Kirk, that you hit that actually resonate with everything that we are seeing in our data as well as we track the industry. But a couple of themes that you talked about, I think we are seeing massive amounts of cross-border co-productions in everything that we are observing, especially amongst the Europeans. There's massive amounts of exchange that's happening of IP that then gets cross-bordered, if there's a word like that. But the other observation that's also similar was when I was talking to Matthew Helderman at Bonded, he talked about his observations around horror as well. I think they've been involved with a couple of those Terrifier movies, and those have done well for them. He was speaking very, very excited about that. So I think it does actually sort of talk to a lot of the trends that we're seeing off late. But it's interesting about some of the observations that you made relating to the box office and just the audiences that have not returned in as many numbers from a pre-pandemic level. Kirk, one question which I had was relating to just the before and after. In terms of, I mean, one of the discussion points that we're seeing within industry is that the budgets, there's a greater encouragement for lower budget movies. That I don't know if that's something that you've seen shifted. If you can talk a little bit about both the budgets as well as the financing of those projects.
I think my sort of mantra has always been that there's the reality and then there's a perception of reality. And sometimes the perception of reality is actually more of how people make decisions. So,
Yep.
I think we're living in a world of thresholds. And we're seeing films that are made for a few $100,000 that look like a few million. And then the opposite is true for films that cost a couple $1 million but look like they didn't cost that much. So right. I think as long as the perception of reality is at a certain level, then those films can be distributed and find their way to an audience. But I always recommend to filmmakers the importance of cast. It's the one constant I would say in our business is that it's extremely, really difficult to market and distribute a film if there's no recognizable cast. And right. I mean, it's very rare that we see a film that breaks out with that's lightning in a bottle or extraordinary filmmaking if it doesn't have any cast attached to it. And our buyers oftentimes who are pre-buying films are doing it on the basis of the director, the script, but most importantly, the cast.
And would you say that has had another big sort of impact in the way independent movies are getting financed right now?
I think we're seeing actors become directors. We're seeing we're seeing a willingness to be involved in the ownership of content, and so we're kind of open arms to engage with all of the creative community, including the actors who want to support a film or direct a film or produce a film. And I think that's good. It's less, the traditional studio system, I think is really breaking down, and we're seeing it kind of in real time. Right. And we're seeing independent distributors look at A24 or Neon, for example, who are really stepping up and taking, that spot that a lot of the call it the more art house divisions of the studios had for a while. But they're, certainly A24 and Neon, Bleecker Street are competing with Focus or 20th Century Films, formerly Fox Searchlight. And so, it's interesting. It's an interesting time in the industry.
That's right. Yep. We can totally sort of relate to that piece. I was also curious, Kirk, about the impact on financing models, right? I was actually sort of also speaking with some of the financiers in the UK market, and it's interesting. I picked up a couple of lines which I would love to get your reactions on when I was actually sort of talking about equity financing in the UK. I got two reactions from two different financiers. One said, "Equity financing, what is that? Right? Where is it?" And the other said, had a even more cryptic comment about gap is the new equity. Gap financing is the new equity. I said, okay, these are very interesting one-liners that I'm picking up. But I just want to get your sense of financing models.
I mean, I think that investing should be about assessment of risk. Really, yes. I mean, that's at the bottom line. Whether you're investing in a public company or you're investing in a private venture, films are truly like investing in private equity, you know,
That's right.
possibilities. And so it should be priced. It should be, those equity investors should get, if it's a higher risk, they should get a higher reward. And I think that, like any industry, the more sophisticated, the more educated the investor, the better that they can make those investment choices. I mean, certainly recognition of IP, recognition of a brand really helps, the film get out there. The execution, the director, the producers, the execution of the film based on a good script. Those are kind of the fundamentals where you have some prediction as to how the film's going to turn out. But I do think that, in terms of Myriad, in terms of our company, we've always been flexible. We've always, the first goal is to get the film made. And so oftentimes debt or even equity will ask sales companies and distributors, to take a reduced commission until they've been able to recoup their investment plus some sort of rate on return. And certainly our company policy is to be open to that in order to get films financed. I do think that GAAP should be priced less than equity investment because it's typically a more secure situation where you actually have contracts, and you need to, as again, the due diligence on that should be making sure that those contracts are with reputable distributors from whatever territories. And there are certain territories that are historically difficult because you don't have the kind of legal recourse. So we've had a lot of issues in Korea over the years, a lot of issues in the CIS countries. So and you just that you kind of have to be savvy about, and those companies that, whether it's a private company like Headgear or if it's a bank, they're assessing whether they're willing to lend 100% against a particular contract or 50% or nothing at all.
This is so fascinating. Again, I think I completely understand where you're coming from. Incidentally, one of the companies that I was speaking with was Headgear. So that there you go. That's exactly what I heard from Phil Hunt.
Yeah, well, look, Phil's very experienced. He's been around a long time, and he's a really great example of somebody who has all that information that they've been able to collect, and so that's how they assess their risk whenever they get involved.
Understood. No, that's fascinating. Again, it explains so many aspects that I've been hearing from different experts within the sector. Kirk, one question that I had was just in the last couple of years or maybe 3 years, what's been the total amount of sort of projects that you're sort of seeing, or at this point, what's the throughput that you're sort of looking at? How many projects are you involved with? You can give a little bit of a flavor with just Myriad and what currently is going on inside the company.
Well, let me just say there's always a balance between films that we acquire where we have not been involved in the production, that they've gotten produced on their own, and in those instances, we're just assessing the sales value. Other films where we are involved on a pre-production basis, we're really trying. One of the other equations is not just your, what is your risk, but what's the timing on it, right? Because we get involved in something like our film that's shot in Northern Ontario called The Pond. It's with Isabel Furman. She's an actress that's part of the Orphan franchise, which Lionsgate right now has been selling internationally, but that's being shot now. That film will come out next year. So we think it's good timing on our film, which is also a kind of horror thriller. But we have to realize that film won't be delivered until Q2 of next year, and so we have to, it's a long, slow process of taking on something and then having it be deliverable and figuring out how it's going to be released. We were able to make I sold the film to Shout Factory, now called Radial, as a pre-buy. So they have come in and they will be the U.S. distributor on it. So we don't have to worry about that. So it's just an example of something that we've done. And we've worked with a Canadian producer who had a familiarity in Northern Ontario. And I think we maximized the incentives that were available in Canada. So, there's the films that we're involved in on a pre-production basis. And then there's the films where we're just acquiring completed films and then getting them right out to the market. We acquired a film called This Tempting Madness that stars Simone Ashley, who was in the Bridgerton series. It hasn't been announced yet, but that film will be released in late Q1. And we've started selling it and started making sales on it at the AFM. It's a psychological thriller.
Wow. Congratulations on that, on all of those deals and transactions. In fact, it's an interesting segue then for us to get to how 2026 is looking. What are you most excited about? What are you maybe less excited about? If you can maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, we're trying some new ventures in a way. So, for example, we've gotten involved in a feature documentary, which is unusual for us, and I call it sort of faith-based adjacent, but it's a feature documentary about follows an archaeologist searching for the lost Ark of the Bible. So no Indiana Jones, but it's the same Ark, and so there's a deal in place with Fathom, which I don't know if you know much about Fathom, but they're owned by the 3 major U.S. cinema chains, exhibition companies. And so we have a 1,000 screen guaranteed release in March of next year. And so we're actually looking for P&A for that release. And we're going to see what that kind of hopefully successful release will do for how it will impact both international and then the downstream windows in the U.S. And I will say it's kind of fascinating because Fathom, they plan those releases way ahead of time. They build the marketing and the publicity, but films that can that are attractive to a more faith-based audience. It's so much about building for group sales, and so that takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight, and so we're engaged in that, and I find the process really fascinating.
Interesting. You mentioned something very interesting. I wanted to sort of have a sidebar question relating to guaranteed release. In the last couple of years, how have you sort of seen project completion risk? Are you sort of seeing that at all? Have you seen changes on the insurance side? Do you dabble in, or do you sort of get involved on the insurance part?
We're always looking at insurance. I mean, production was so tough during COVID because you couldn't get.
That's right.
You couldn't get regularly required insurance. But what we're seeing is a lot of financiers and even some of the banks are not insisting on a completion bond anymore, and so that has its own risk. But if you've got directors and producers that have a strong track record as a producer, you're reducing your costs, without having a big contingency or having your bond fees that can reduce the cost of production. But that's just that's something that those institutions or companies are going to have to assess.
Understood. No, thanks for that. Actually, again, we're trying to sort of really look at what should indie producers expect in 2026. I think this actually speaks to a lot of those aspects that we're trying to piece together. And then you spoke about a host of deals that we've recently done for 2026. just in terms of the horizon that you see for Myriad, are there new markets that you're entering? Are you sort of wishing for certain projects in certain new themes, genres, IP? Talk a little bit about what you want to dabble into as a new area in the coming year.
We get probably 10 scripts a week, so
Oh boy.
you can do the math and
Yeah, wow.
so we're really we have that kind of incoming volume, so we're trying to be selective. But one of the things that we're always looking at is, where does the film shoot? Where can it be shot? Are there co-production opportunities to help with the financing? But I so we're looking at places that have great tax incentives, like Spain, for example. Certain regions of Spain are especially good. We're looking at Greece, which had some issues, but they seem to be resolved. We're looking at Malta. I'm talking to companies and the Film Commission in Malta, and they're being very aggressive right now. So that's an interesting place. And of course, the UK, where production is really up overall.
Yes.
You've got an increased UK tax credit, but you also have, as you mentioned before, there's an investment community there that is helping films get made. And they're trying to continue to build out their production facilities and post-production facilities in the UK, which I think creates opportunities for individual projects. So we have a number of UK projects that are moving forward. I should mention also that we were involved in a film that shot late last year in Ireland that's just now coming to the market. It's called the title that it's being released is called Once Upon a Time in a Cinema, and it's shot in Limerick, Ireland. But that's a situation where Screen Ireland stepped up. They were the largest investor in the film, and they really supported the Irish film community. And we're seeing that more and more, that a lot of the government financing bodies are are supporting the local communities. And then they're also like Telefilm in Canada is really very supportive of any international co-productions, official co-productions. So, and that's true, in different countries around the world. So we find a project that might work well as a co-production with territories that have really great incentives. And that's kind of the first level. But of course, we want the script to be that can travel, the material that can travel. We want to work with a director and a production team that are experienced. And then we want to see cast that we can work with.
Understood. And again, Kirk, absolutely bang on relating to the changes that we've seen in film commission activism. One of the things that Vitrina tracks is the most active film commissions on a monthly basis. And our latest leaderboard for 2025, we compiled it for the last 9 months. The last 10 months was Germany, Australia, Canada, Thailand, and Qatar. And again, you mentioned you hit at least 3 of those markets in our conversation. I don't know if you had any exposure to Germany or if you were also seeing Germany.
Sure, let me get to that, but I just want to say and go on the record as saying, in Trump's first term, he killed our business with China. I mean, we were doing close to 7 figures every year. That business just went away, and we were involved in a number of co-productions, and that business just literally went away. And it was because of the U.S. policy with China, and it really hurt our business. I think the studios would agree that the business took a huge dive as a result of those politics. And under the Biden administration, it was starting to come back, and now it's gone over a cliff again with Trump. So that's just my little political rant. But yes, we are involved. We have a couple of projects that are gearing up to shoot in Germany. We shot a film a year ago, now over a year ago, called American Sweatshop in Cologne with a German production company, German director who actually lives in the States but went back to Germany to direct. And Anita Alsani, who's our German producer, did a great job of organizing and bringing in both the federal credits there as well as the regional credits. And then we also work with MMC Studios in Cologne who really helped that production and provided support, and we did the post-production there as well. So the film starred Lily Reinhart. We took it to South by Southwest earlier this year, and the film just came out through Brainstorm in the U.S. But that's a classic example of sort of cobbling together the different parts of a production and shooting it in Germany because of the incentives there.
Understood. No, that makes a lot of sense. Looks like you're active across all the major markets where there is tremendous amount of film commission activity as well as incentives.
We want to be. I mean, we're right. I went to Turkey a year and a half ago after Cannes. I'd never been to Istanbul before. It was a great trip. I learned a lot. Unfortunately, that is a discretionary tax credit you get after production, so it's almost impossible to finance going in. But great crews there, lovely, helpful people. Guy Ritchie has shot a couple films there, and we would be open and looking for ways to work in Turkey, for example.
Understood. No, my hunch is that, Kirk, with everything that you've covered, if you were getting 10 scripts a week, there might be a few more that might get added with a host of our members listening to you speak about different geographies and projects that you're involved with. My last question really was relating to, some of the new technologies that are coming in. Of course, we've been talking about gaming engines that are really improving the rendering of breathtaking shots and VFX. But on the other side, we are also seeing Gen AI and that whole revolution. Are you seeing costs going down? Are you worried about these technologies, or just as a sort of viewpoint?
Well, I think AI. I think as a society, we should have guardrails for AI. But I think that AI as a tool to bring down certain costs, especially VFX costs, just makes a lot of sense. You're doing digital work anyway. Why not use AI as an effective tool? I think the other thing that we're looking at shooting a film at Twickenham Studios in London next year. Samsung built a virtual production LED wall there. And we're seeing, it started off with series like The Mandalorian, where you're getting incredible production value in a studio without having to actually go to locations. And I think that is a great, that's something that's, you're only limited really by your creativity. You don't have to go to Morocco anymore to shoot Star Wars. You can shoot it in a studio somewhere. And I think that a lot of the independent producers who couldn't afford to go to these exotic locations can now organize it and shoot it to the audience's satisfaction in studios. So I think that work can be really it can be cost effective to use AI for some of that.
That's right. Again, we seeing all of these aspects play out. On that positive note, Kirk, I wanted to really thank you for a very, very interesting and very in-depth conversation. I think we hit lots of different notes on production, co-production, and financing as well as your utilization of different geographies and tax credits. Thank you so much for talking to the Vitrina community today.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to speaking to you again sometime.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.